This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a quick run through the headlines and the markets tonight. So let's start with Nigeria. The market over there essentially closing about 0.33% lower in today's trading session. The JSE, however, still powering ahead, essentially defying all the naysayers that were looking at African markets and thinking, man, 2021 might actually be a negative year for them. The case is very different, up 12.9% for the top 40 in that particular market. In contrast, in East Africa, the NSE 20, though, is down by over 0.33%. We'll be speaking about BAT and its dividend policy that has been approved so far this year. 4.5 billion shillings in dividend payouts expected, but its share price is up by about 30% so far in 2021. Here's what's coming up tonight. Egypt's central bank is cautioning investors against the use of Bitcoin due to its volatility. Zimbabwe's president warns of a crackdown on companies in the country's financial services sector. And China's exports in the first quarter of the year have gone up by at least 40%. Our starting point tonight, however, is in the world of healthcare, specifically vaccines. We start with what could potentially be another setback and plans to get more COVID-19 vaccines distributed across the continent. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration agency, the FDA, has called for an immediate pause on the use of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. Now, federal health agencies say there may be a connection between the vaccine and rare disorders involving blood clots. The New York Times has reported at least 6 recipients had suffered severe side effects, including 1 death and 1 critical hospitalization. All 6 persons were women between the ages of 18 and 48. Now, the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices will be meeting tomorrow to discuss these cases. In the meantime, the FDA has launched an investigation. Elsewhere, Egypt's central bank is renewing its warnings against dealing in or dabbling in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. The Apex Bank is saying that there's a relatively high risk involved in dealing with cryptocurrencies because they're dominated by, or rather a key feature of them is their instability and extreme volatility. Here's Yasser Hakim with this report from Cairo.
The use of virtual currency is quickly growing worldwide. It's increasingly being adopted and traded in some stock markets and accepted by some central banks and companies as a usable currency. However, Egypt's central bank believes it's too unsafe to be released in the North African country.
The ban is due to the fact that it is a virtual currency without any base. No nation owns it, and it has no financial assets. It could widely be used in money laundering and shady trading. It facilitates some illegal operations that could be otherwise detected within the formal banking system. This is the main concern of the Egyptian central bank. And not only virtual currencies are banned, but even the forex trade is prohibited because it can also be used in money laundering.
In spite of cryptos being accepted in major economies, most experts believe it will take time for digital currencies to take a foothold in Egypt.
The banking sector is run by old-school traditional executives. There must be a major shift in approach to accept this new idea. If you are offered a virtual wallet with digital currencies to purchase goods, you will not believe it. There must be social change, awareness campaigns, and flexibility from banking leaders. There can be quick steps that lead to a fast transition, but I don't expect it to take place at the moment, maybe in 10 years or so.
For now, the central bank has made it clear there will be punishment for anyone dealing in the digital currency market. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And just a quick update as far as the markets are concerned with regard to Johnson & Johnson. It's down at least 1.95% in trading so far today, essentially wiping out most of the gains that it had so far in the year. We'll keep you posted on developments as the trading day rolls on. Now, on to the G20 group of countries. So they have further extended their debt service suspension initiative until December. The G20 countries had established the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, or DSSI as it's more commonly known, from May last year. The idea there was to help countries concentrate their resources on fighting the coronavirus pandemic, safeguarding lives and jobs. Africa's largest economy is one of the countries that stands to benefit from that extension. Here's Deji Badmus reporting on the likely impact that extension could have on Nigeria's economy.
With the Nigerian economy taking a big hit from the COVID-19 pandemic and the fall in oil price, the extension of the debt service suspension till December could not be coming at a better time. It would at least provide some reprieve for a country just coming out of recession.
For me, I call it forbearance or probably shifting the evil day, but of course it gives us some kind of leeway to be able to use the monies we would have used in servicing the loans to get into some other economic recovery efforts by the government. So it's a good thing that is happening, but I wish they could extend it a little more so that forbearance can just sustain countries like ours.
What it basically could do is to free up funds for other developmental uses. But for me, from an analytical point of view, the question has always been some of these accumulation of debt we've seen over time. Where is the money going to? How much, when we talk of effectiveness, how much of these monies are being used effectively and efficiently to support economic development in the country?
Nigeria's debt level has been a major talking point in the country for quite a while. As at December last year, the country's total debt portfolio stood at over $86 billion. A quarter of the country's budget for this year is dedicated to debt repayments. And with its revenue badly depleted, the government has to borrow even more to fund the budget.
The level of borrowing is not unreasonable, it's not high. The problem we have is that of revenue. So what we need to do is to increase our revenues to be able to enhance our debt service obligation capacity.
The government has taken measures like tax reforms and diversification of its income streams in order to boost its revenue. But it would take some time before the measures yield tangible results.
If we think we are not generating enough revenue to be able to cover some levels of our deficit, I expect as an individual that our expenditure pattern will change. Our spending pattern should change, and the cost of governance should reduce.
If we say we will not borrow, and therefore we will not build rails and major infrastructure until our revenue rises enough, then we will regress as a country, we will be left behind, we won't be able to improve our business environment, and our economy will not grow.
The extension of the debt service suspension initiative may not end Nigeria's borrowing, but it would at least give the country a chance to use whatever it would have used in servicing its debts to revitalize an economy that needs all the help it can get. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Onto our backyard now. According to Knight Frank's Africa Horizons report covering 2021 and 2022, Nairobi is the top city in Africa for innovation. It ranks among the top 100 in the world. Kenya's capital, in fact, it ranked ahead of Cape Town, which came in second. Kampala was ranked third. Cairo and Johannesburg came in at fourth and fifth places, respectively. Dar es Salaam in Tanzania came in sixth, followed by Lagos in Nigeria, Dakar in Senegal, Accra in Ghana, and Addis Ababa closing out the top 10. Now, the survey was based on a score comprising of three components of innovation activity, like the total number of startups in those locations, the level of innovation funding, and innovation infrastructure, like the number of research institutions, for example. And it is in those respects that Nairobi stood out. The ease of doing business also propelled Nairobi to the top position in that particular ranking. All right, then let's dive a little deeper into one aspect of that particular report. Tilda Mwai is a researcher covering real estate markets on the continent. She joins us now live from Dubai. Tilda, good to see you on the program. So there was a very interesting brief that you put together for this particular report. But let's start with Kenya and its real estate market, because we did see a 23% rise in cement consumption in the country last year. But how is COVID-19 affecting investments in commercial and residential real estate so far amidst this pandemic?
Thank you so much for having me. When we look at the real estate sector, and especially for Nairobi, we have noticed that, yes, there was an increase in consumption of cement, but that can be attributed to infrastructure projects and the affordable housing engagements that are going on in the continent. But when you look at the real estate sector in specific, we did see a drop in the approvals of building plans, and this dropped by 28% in the year to September 2020. And this can largely be attributed to developers taking a wait and see approach on the supply side of things. Overall, on the demand side of things, we did see a 47% overall decline in office absorption for 2020. And when you look at the residential side, we did see a decline of we also did see a decline, although for the residential side of things, it was more stable. So it was generally, but we also have to remember that prior to COVID, the market was already subdued. And so the impact of COVID was just an add-on to an already subdued market for Nairobi and generally even for majority of the markets across Africa.
Indeed. So when you say that the residential market was subdued, did we see any sort of demand for essentially people trying to sort of move down markets to avoid paying much higher rents, looking for much cheaper property and therefore perhaps spurring demand at the lower end of the pyramid?
Sorry, I did not catch that.
Did we see demand shifting much lower down the market with people looking to reduce their rental costs because of the impact that this pandemic is having on jobs and salaries?
I'm not catching your question clearly. My apologies.
Okay.
I can't hear you. It's a bit static on your end.
All right, no worries. Let's move on to tourism. So one of the things that you focused on in your report was that you said that tourism is not likely to have a recovery, at least until 2023. So what are the options that developers, the property owners are considering to make these assets viable between now and then? Because you can't have a dead asset for the next 3, 4, maybe even 5 years.
Yeah, so when you look at the tourism side of things, there has been quite a few adjustments that have had to be made by property owners and developers alike. So one of the things that COVID has done is provide an opportunity for developers and property owners to leverage on different aspects, such as concessions that are granted that could be made in terms of lease terms. We've also seen joint management approaches coming into shape. And also we've seen most of the property owners opting for a repurposing of their assets. The pandemic has also presented opportunities in terms of people
Unfortunately, we have lost that connection to Tilda Moy. She was, of course, a researcher covering real estate markets in Dubai for Knight Frank. Time now for a run through some company headlines. Right then, company headlines. Let's start with British American Tobacco. Its Kenyan shareholders are expected to approve a final dividend of 41 shillings 50 cents per ordinary share. That's roughly about $42 million in total payouts. Confirmation and final payments will be due on the 12th of May 2021 during the company's virtual AGM in line with COVID-19 protocols, of course, and public health directives. So the final dividend will bring the total dividend payout to BAT shareholders to at least 45 shillings a share. The social media giant Twitter has announced that it is establishing its presence in Africa by opening its first office on the continent in Ghana. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey announced the move on his Twitter account. The San Francisco company said the move is part of its growth strategy and it aims to make it easier for pretty much anyone really to join the platform. Still in the world of tech, Microsoft plans to buy a tech firm known for helping to develop Apple's Siri speech recognition software in a deal valued at $19.7 billion. The purchase of Nuance Communications, which includes, of course, its debt, is the second largest in Microsoft's history after its acquisition of the networking site LinkedIn back in 2016. Microsoft said it would bolster its software and its machine learning expertise for healthcare companies. And finally, the French government has announced plans to contribute a $4.7 billion recapitalization of Air France-KLM, increasing its stake from the current 14.3% to nearly 30%. That would make the government Air France's biggest single shareholder. The French government is seeking to convert a $3.6 billion loan granted last year into a perpetual hybrid bond instrument, in addition to subscribing to a $1.2 billion share issue. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up. Zimbabwe's president is warning of a crackdown on companies in the country's financial services sector. And Ghana has managed to raise $3 billion from the international debt markets. We'll have the details when we come back.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back to the program. Let's head over to Zimbabwe, where the country's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has vowed to take action against companies in the financial services sector. He's accusing them of profiteering. Now, Mr. Mnangagwa has previously issued such warnings to private companies that he's blamed for allegedly undermining his efforts to turn around an economy plagued by annual inflation over 200% and persistent foreign currency shortages. Now, just last year, remember, his government shut down the Zimbabwe stock market for 5 weeks. It also singled out the largest mobile operator in the country, Econet Wireless, accusing it of undermining the nation's currency through its mobile money service. So let's explore what's going on in a bit more detail with Farai Mokutu. He joins us now live from Harare with more data on this story. So Farai, there's a lot of missing elements to this story. Have you had any more clarifications from the government on what firms the president was referring to by saying, quote, there are sharks in the financial sector? And what exactly is the problem as he sees it?
Well, Ramah, no further detail or information coming through from the president's office or government as yet. But just observing this and having followed the developments, some of which you've already made mention of, I would imagine that there are one of two things or both that the president is referring to. Number one is the issue of excessive bank charges. There's been an outcry by the banking public in recent months and years where people think that bank charges are too high. And many banks here generate a significant amount of their revenue from bank charges as opposed to what should be their traditional revenue streams, which is lending. And so that issue of bank charges has come up in the past. And I know in recent weeks, the Treasury has been taking to task some banks for failing to follow a directive to pay interest on bank deposits. So people who have their money, are keeping their money in their banks, have not been getting interest on those deposits. And, there was a statement against banks that were failing to follow that directive. So that is the one thing. The second relates to the fact that I think banks have been seen as a conduit for facilitating or enabling trade in foreign currency on the black market. In the mobile money platform conduit that was used the measures that have been put in terms of trade there. Now banks have been used as, the go-to platform. People are able to transfer money electronically almost instantly, and that may be seen as one way of fueling and facilitating and perpetuating this parallel market trade. And that could be what the president is referring to. But, as you mentioned, this is something that everyone here is watching very closely, because the last time the president spoke in very ominous and very chilling terms, he referred to wolves in sheep's clothing, and very soon after that we did see the closure of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange and the restrictions on Econet. So people are expecting that there might be some form of action, very dramatic action, that will follow this latest statement by the president.
Let's pick up on that last point, because last year, as you mentioned, when this probe into Econet Wireless was announced, the argument there was that they were suspending some of its mobile money transactions, and they're also probing it for alleged money laundering and capital expatriation. What's been the development in that particular case? Because there was this big bang, we're announcing this probe, and then after that, silence.
Indeed, I think a very big bang was made, a lot of noise was made about that, but very little in terms of people being hauled to the courts, people being charged. Very little of that has ensued after that. One would imagine that it is very difficult to sort of determine or decide which transactions or which transfers were bona fide, which ones were not, and which ones were used for, fueling the parallel market trade. But certainly, I think the authorities may have deliberately gone the big bang route to instill that fear, to intimidate and to deter people that had been using this platform, because it had been used, it had become quite pervasive. So the effect would have been to intimidate people, to stop them from doing it. And I think it has worked, because in addition to the restrictions in terms of how much money you can transfer on the mobile money platform, people are now shying away. They are reluctant to use mobile money platforms in terms of for purposes of trading in foreign currency, which is perhaps the reason why the banking sector has now become the go-to sector, or the go-to platform. So I think the impact or the effect of that the government wanted to achieve by making this big bang was to scare people, and it has worked. But in addition to that, we've also seen the mobile companies themselves, in particular Econet, instituting more stringent KYC measures, being more stringent in terms of monitoring and regulating transactions. So inadvertently, or rather, the effect that government wanted to achieve has been achieved through that big bang that you make mention of, Ramah.
Right. One last question for you. So Zimbabwe's currency, at least on the official market, is only weakened by about 3.5% so far in the year. That's a shift comparable to the Naira, of course, with quite a few caveats on top of that. It's been above 80 to the dollar since last September. Headline inflation is in decline. At least some key trends are moving in the right direction. So why are authorities so jittery about what's going on in the financial services sector, yet these trends seem to be broadly going where they want them to go?
Well, I think, Ramah, what they're trying to do here is being preemptive to try and nip this in the bud, because, yes, the Zimbabwe dollar has held its own on the official foreign currency auction, and certainly has maintained its value there. But what we're starting to see in recent weeks on the parallel market, on the informal market, there is a depreciation that is happening there. The gap between the official rate and the parallel market rate is now starting to widen. And the more that happens, the more people will be enticed or attracted to start doing doing business and trading on the parallel market. And I think that is what government is trying to stop before it happens.
What are parallel market rates looking like at the moment?
Currency as hard as possible. Well, the parallel market rates, you're looking at about 120 to 1, whereas the official rate is about 84. Today it was 84. So the parallel market rate is about 120. A week ago it was about 110, 115. So I think the reason why that's happening is, the market is usually flush with money during the tobacco season. The tobacco selling season ended around August, September last year. And so essentially for the final quarter of last year, there hasn't been a huge supply of foreign currency currency in this market. And I think that is why we're starting to see this depreciation on the parallel market. And I think what government is trying to do is to stop it before that gap widens even more. And by going after the banks, they are hoping to deter people, to make it harder for people to transact and make it more difficult for people to get access to foreign currency on the parallel market. What that will do is it will continue to support the official rate, but also it will also assist its efforts to try and contain inflation, because a lot of the inflation in Zimbabwe is driven by the foreign currency rate.
Indeed. So that's roughly a nearly 50% premium, in fact. We'll certainly keep tabs on this story. Thanks for the update. Farai Mokutu there live in Harare, Zimbabwe. Now, from Zimbabwe, let's head over to West Africa, specifically to Ghana. The economy of there is set to benefit from a $3 billion Eurobond that the government's raised from international debt markets. Now, the overall target is to borrow around $5 billion or so this year to supplement the country's budget deficit. Economists, however, are deeply concerned about the country's rising debt levels, now standing at 76% of GDP. With the details, here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai.
Business has started picking up for Solomon Bulawa. The demand for stationery has increased as schools and businesses reopen in Ghana after months of shutdown due to the coronavirus pandemic.
The income you expected to have, you are not getting it. Offices were not purchasing, schools were not purchasing. So normally we were even at home, you are not even coming at all.
Like Bulawa, many traders in Ghana are trying to recover from the disruptions caused by COVID-19. The government has secured a $3 billion loan from the international debt market to support economic growth. Ghana's currency, the cedi, depreciated by 4% against the US dollar last year. Analysts say the loan will help shore up the central bank's foreign exchange reserves.
The cedi is not strong when it comes to other exchange in terms of the US dollar. So with $3 billion coming in, obviously in the short to a bit of medium term, we can have a bit of currency stabilization in terms of the cedi. And that is also very key for every business or every economic activity in the country.
Ghana's federal loans have received public backlash, and economists are concerned about the country's rising debt, which is at 76% of GDP. The IMF has projected Ghana's debt to hit 86.6% by 2025.
As it is now, the government is paying debt that was raised, probably not during their time, but in the previous administration, and they are paying. Government is a going concern. But the point is, the investment of this money, how are we investing it? Is it always going to be invested in paying recurrent expenditure, or we are investing in productive sectors that in itself will generate revenue for the economy? I think that is where the key link is for us going forward.
The government plans to use the loan to pay off some of its debts, as well as fund infrastructure developments, including building of roads and hospitals. Ghana aims to borrow a total of $5 billion from the international debt markets this year. The government says the $3 billion loan acquired so far shows that investors are confident in the Ghanaian economy. Aside from pumping the economy with the $3 billion loan, the government has also introduced new taxes this year to increase internal revenue generation. But some small traders like Solomon Bulawa say the taxes are making life more difficult in the short term.
Things are really going to be a little bit tough. The government does not really step out with its import duty. We are really going to have a serious crisis on our head.
Ghana is targeting a GDP growth of 5% this year. The government says it expects a rapid economic recovery as it further eases restrictions with the rollout of COVID-19 vaccination. And as his business expands, Solomon Bulawa hopes to restock more stationery in his shop. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
On to North Africa, where authorities in Tunisia have announced the creation of a fund to collect donations for vulnerable groups affected by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The tourism-dependent North African state has been hit particularly hard, and its economy is struggling. From Tunis, here's Adnan Chouachi.
Najib Hamid is a chef who used to work at a restaurant in downtown Tunis. Since he lost his job a few months ago, Najib has been struggling to pay his rent and bills.
We are fed up with empty promises. We lost our jobs during the lockdown. Professionals cannot feed their children. The coronavirus crisis has caused the bankruptcy of thousands of restaurants.
53-year-old cafe waiter Arbi Mejri is, however, against the government aid. Instead, he is urging authorities to create an effective support mechanism which guarantees income protection during the pandemic.
I lost half of my income. Are these poor people supposed to beg the state for help? We need concrete solutions and real support from the government. The COVID-19 relief fund will not solve our problems because there are hundreds of thousands of professionals that have been affected.
Tunisian authorities said the COVID-19 Relief and Solidarity Fund will be created this week and have promised it will be managed in a transparent way. The country's Prime Minister Hichem Meshishi and his government officials will donate half their salaries for April.
We have created a national solidarity fund to help the people whose businesses and livelihoods have been affected by COVID-19. We invite all Tunisians, especially civil servants who have permanent salaries, to donate to the most vulnerable population. The COVID-19 jobs and income losses is unprecedented.
The World Bank Group's Board of Executive Directors approved recently $300 million in financing for the COVID-19 Social Protection Emergency Response Project. The new project will provide cash transfers for approximately 1 million vulnerable Tunisian households to help them deal with the economic impact of the COVID-19 crisis, while also supporting the rollout of a comprehensive national social safety net system. Tunisian Prime Minister said 1/3 of a $300 million World Bank loan will be directed to supporting vulnerable groups affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Hichem Meshishi added that the government will not abandon the citizens who have lost their jobs since the outbreak of the health crisis. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up. China's exports in the first quarter of the year grew by 40%. And after months of lockdown, businesses in the UK start to reopen.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's run through some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has called for an immediate pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. Federal health agencies say there might be a connection between the vaccine on one hand and a rare disorder involving blood clots on the other. The New York Times has reported that at least 6 individuals had suffered some severe side effects, including 1 death and 1 critical hospitalization. On the continent, Burkina Faso's former president Blaise Compaoré has been charged in connection with the murder of another former leader of the country, Thomas Sankara. The then president was killed in 1987 in a coup led by Mr. Compaoré. Sankara was seen by many as a revolutionary and charismatic leader, way ahead of his time. The military tribunal charged Compaoré in absentia. He faces additional charges of undermining state security. He fled to Côte d'Ivoire following his ouster from power in 2014. The Electoral Commission in Chad is set to announce soon the provisional results, but the Commission has until the 25th of April to announce the final results. President Idriss Déby was among the candidates taking part in the poll. If he does win re-election, this will be his 6th consecutive term in office. And the Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga says that the first release of nuclear wastewater into the ocean will take place in about 2 years. The plan, however, has sparked health and environmental concerns both in Japan and in her neighboring countries. The local fishing industry, for one, has strongly opposed the move, as have China and South Korea. Tokyo says that work to release water used to cool nuclear fuel will start in roughly 24 months. That's a run through your headlines. Now let's turn to China's trade performance in the first quarter of 2021. The global recovery does continue to spur demand for exports from the country, both inside and outside China.
China's foreign trade is back in business. Foreign trade in the first quarter of 2021 surged by 29%, a significant boost as it's grown by 1/5 compared with data as far back as 2019. Exports grew by nearly 40% from last year, while imports increased by nearly 20%.
Global trade recovery is a major reason behind this growth. For instance, the Purchasing Managers' Index of America, the EU, and Japan have all picked up, which led to China's export growth. China's domestic recovery and epidemic control also provided support.
In terms of specific products, imports of corn and wheat have surged compared to last year's data. Among exports, electromechanical products grew fast, making up 60% of the country's total exports. Last year, China signed the RCEP trade agreement with 14 nations, forming the world's largest free trade bloc. In the first quarter, China's trade with its RCEP trading partners grew by 23%.
Export growth comes mainly from a surge in exports in integrated circuits and automatic data processing equipment. China's imports of iron ore grew by over 60%.
Last year, global trading goods fell 5.3% due to the pandemic. The WTO predicts it could bounce back by 8% this year. But Li says China's trade still faces many uncertainties as COVID-19 continues to ravage many countries.
External factors could still affect China's foreign trade, not just the pandemic, but also unexpected situations such as the recent blockage of the Suez Canal, which affected international logistics in the short term.
Analysts expect China's foreign trade to continue the upward streak in the second quarter, but say growth rates could pare down due to geopolitical risks and rising costs for raw materials. So Huiyao, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, this has been a long-awaited day for many businesses and customers, in England especially. People will be able to have their first sit-down pint in a pub in months today. Others, of course, are looking forward to visiting indoor gyms, shops, zoos and hairdressers. Now, for restaurants and pubs which are opening, they can serve customers at outside tables. Here's CGTN's Yola Daffyd for this report.
The covered terrace is ready. Next come the tables and chairs. Midday is 0 hour, the first dining customers since last December. It's been a long 15 weeks.
We've had the team back for a week. Obviously, we've been prepping in the kitchen, but we've been training all the staff again. We haven't traded for 4 months, so you can't just turn that back on overnight. It's, you know, to do it to the standard that I'd be happy with takes quite a lot of preparation and planning.
Non-essential shops, hairdressers and gyms, as well as restaurants, are reopening after lengthy lockdowns in England, Wales and Northern Ireland.
Which has led to a bustle in hospitality venues across most of the UK. But it's not total freedom yet, because restaurants and pubs are only able to serve outside. More COVID restrictions will be lifted in May and June.
Despite some wintry weather, Sam's restaurant near Hammersmith's Old Bridge is as full as is currently allowed. 32 diners outside, while the tables indoors are still out of bounds.
I think what we're most worried about is, could there be a delay to reopening inside on May the 17th? Because that's what we're all desperately waiting for, and then for hopefully June the 21st and no restrictions. If there's any delay to that, or any form of further lockdown, I think that could be the nail in the coffin for a lot of restaurants.
For the last few weeks, staff have retrained. Kitchen fridges have been restocked and the cash investment in reopening is substantial. The virus is expected to spread as more people socialise again, and there are concerns how manageable any spikes will be. And with close to 40 million now vaccinated across the UK, can those more dangerous strains of the virus be contained as people start to enjoy themselves once more? Yolo Abdavid, CGTN, London.
Another area reopening today in England is parts of the tourism sector. It's the 5th biggest industry, the 3rd largest employer in the UK. So its success this year is hugely important to the wider economy. But with little in the way of foreign visitors, hopes are now being pinned on the domestic market and hopefully some sunshine. John Beaver reports.
After a long, hard winter, a ray of sunshine for the tourism industry. Overnight stays are no longer prohibited. Any self-contained accommodation is free to welcome guests. The Easter holidays in Bath would mark the start of the tourist season, but things are still quiet. As a tour guide, Nick Gain normally relies on visitors from Asia and America. Despite everything, he's optimistic and is pinning his hopes on the domestic market.
We have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to change quickly. We have to be able to work with what the market requires. And I think if restaurants, cafes, tour guides, any museum can do that, then I think they stand a reasonable chance of being able to survive and be here for the next 10 years.
With no definite answers on when foreign travel is allowed or where English tourists will be able to go, domestic options are very appealing after a 3rd national lockdown. Most holiday accommodation websites have very little available when it comes to the most popular tourist destinations, and whatever is left is almost certainly more expensive. Demand has driven up prices by an average of 35% compared to last year, according to one recent study. But major indoor attractions are still closed. The SS Great Britain here in Bristol, for example, isn't allowed to reopen until May, and there's likely to be a need for more support to keep other venues afloat.
If you're St Paul's Cathedral or Westminster Abbey or the Tower of London, for example, in a normal year, 90% of the people buying your tickets will be from overseas. So there's a whole swathe of the visitor economy who will really feel the loss of inbound visitors this year. And I don't think that even massive numbers of us Brits going to them will make up for that. So they're going to require additional support to see them through this year and to thrive and survive in the course of the next couple of years.
COVID wardens will be a familiar sight at tourist hotspots in England this year. The picturesque Cotswolds expecting a season unlike any other as people stay closer to home. What tourism businesses need is a summer with no further travel restrictions and some good weather. John Beaver, CGTN, in the southwest of England.
Now, the world is currently experiencing a shortage, a crippling one, of semiconductors. The United States regards this as a national security issue, and the country's president, Joe Biden, is promising to invest heavily in chip production capacity at home. That's crucial for many advanced industries. From Washington, here's Kate Fisher.
The chip shortage is affecting just about every US industry, but it has hit automakers particularly hard. GM, Ford and Stellantis have all had to close their plants temporarily, at least some of them, while they wait for new supplies to come in. But the White House says this is also a national security issue because just about all emerging technologies rely on chips. That's civilian and military. It's everything from pharmaceuticals to weapons systems. President Biden said that it was vital that the US is not left behind.
China and the rest of the world is not waiting, and there's no reason why Americans should wait. We're investing aggressively in areas like semiconductors and batteries. That's what they're doing and others. So must we.
Well, the president is pushing for Congress to invest billions of dollars in this industry so that the US is not left behind. It's all part of his multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill.
Chips like the one I have here, these chips, these wafers, are batteries, broadband, it's all infrastructure. This is infrastructure. So look, we need to build the infrastructure of today, not repair the one of yesterday.
Well, President Biden says he does enjoy bipartisan support for this. He said just today he received a letter from 23 senators and 42 House members of both Democrats and Republicans saying that they support the Chips for America program. The issue is he does not enjoy a similar level of bipartisan backing for the rest of his infrastructure bill, and that could cause it issues as he tries to get it through Congress. He does, though, have a lot of support from industry. The meeting had CEOs from many big companies, including Intel, Dell, Samsung, Ford, HP, Alphabet, General Motors, and many, many more. Kate Fisher, CGTN, Washington.
At this year's Shanghai Fashion Week, domestic designers are enjoying increasing popularity and a helping hand to reach a lot more people. CGTN's Chen Tong takes a closer look on what's hot.
Hidden in an alley in downtown Shanghai, this select shop is turning itself into a hub for fashion startups. All types of innovative designs churned out by young designers are present on the shelves. At this season's Shanghai Fashion Week, some 30 fashion shows were also organized by this fashion incubator. You heard that right, fashion incubator.
When you hear about the incubators, you probably think AI, technology, or other emerging industries. But now, there are incubators for young designers. Ones like Neighborhood are helping young designers to reach the next level in their development.
Domestic brand Shushu is one such brand utilizing Neighborhood. The company started to cooperate with the shop since establishment in 2015. Designer Jiang Yutong says Neighborhood saved her a lot of time and hassle while she was opening her business.
Having a platform to reach the retail end is very crucial for startups. It's a very important and excellent opportunity for new designers when they start their businesses.
Where there are designers who want to sell more through Neighborhood, there are also young fashion faces who are willing to push for more exposure. Designers like Louis Shentao Chen, who only just graduated from college and recently put on their own show.
Because I'm still a student, I'm still studying. I don't have the capacity to, make a label and make a team. The most basic thing is the fund, the money. I don't have anything, and then they help me to offer me the showroom. They offer me the contacts of the industry, the Chinese industry, to meet everyone, to meet the buyers.
Fashion incubators aren't an entirely new or novel concept. In fact, places like Neighborhood can be found throughout the fashion capitals of the world. In New York, Paris, and Milan, the incubators fund new designers and allocate industry resources to give them funding. Such a concept is important in a place like Shanghai, which is fast becoming a fashion hub in Asia.
In China, there are many ways you can get help to start a brand. But support shouldn't just be about starting out, but assessing resources as well. For instance, you have to get the industry and consumers to see you, and then you can get professionals to help your business grow.
And China's rapid expansion in the fashion industry is driving more companies like Neighborhood to become fashion supporters. At this season's Shanghai Fashion Week, Bailian Group, a local retail conglomerate, also announced their plans to establish an incubator in the next 3 years. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
Quick run through commodity prices for you. Brent crude just under $64 a barrel. The oil production cartel OPEC did raise its demand forecast today. It's expecting demand to go up by nearly 7% this year on extra 5.9 odd million barrels a day in the course of the year. But even taking into account Saudi Arabia's unwinding of its production cuts, members of the cartel are pumping at least 3.3 million barrels a day less oil than they did before the pandemic hit. Here's what's coming up next. Coming up, we'll take a look at the story of a Nigerian pair who are changing the perceptions of traditional liquor in the country. Welcome back to the program. Ogogoro, or as it's more commonly known, local gin, is consumed not just throughout Nigeria, but across Western and Central Africa too. On Grassroots tonight, CGTN's Wilkiston Yabwa brings you the story of Pedro's. It's a Nigerian brand that's refining and rebranding traditional liquor to meet growing demand for premium spirits in this pandemic.
Meet Pedro's, the brand behind Africa's first distilled premium Ogogoro. Founded by Nigerian duo Lola Pedro and Chibueze Akokwe, Pedro's is on a mission to change how the locally made gin is perceived.
There's nothing that separates us from, let's say, whiskey or tequila or vodka or any other category of spirit that is out there, right? Our spirit deserves to be showcased. Our culture and our heritage deserves to be showcased.
Pedro's Premium Ogogoro is a 100% organic palm spirit, micro-distilled in small batches and handcrafted in Nigeria.
I didn't see much of a difference between some of the big-name brand spirits that we know all across the globe. When you compare those with Ogogoro, they seem very similar to us. So we thought we could take Ogogoro and just highlight it and showcase it to the world.
To make the local gin, Pedro's team works with communities in Delta and Ogun State, southern Nigeria, who make locally filtered palm sups. These villages are largely surrounded by palm trees, making it easy to source palm sups required to make the drink. The palm extract is stored in drums for days for the liquid to ferment. To give it a premium look and taste, the crude gin is then passed through a distilling machine to filter it and make it smoother.
You can never expect 100% consistency. You get like the fact that there'll be different trees that they're tapping at different times with different fermentation of the palm wine. And so sometimes the flavor will be different, but it'll still be something you know is original or authentic or of good quality.
Akokwe and business partner Lola Pedro hope stylish branding will help sell to upmarket customers and compete with similar drinks in the international market. Pedro's Premium Ogogoro is currently supplied to high-end restaurants and bars in Ghana, Kenya and Britain. Bulkisanyabwa, CGTN.
Let's keep that culinary trend going. An entrepreneur in Tunisia has turned to organic farming by growing edible flowers. This journalist turned farmer says she was surprised by the appetite for her homegrown products in the North African state, and she hopes it will see a new culinary culture bloom. CGTN's Adin Chachi visited her farm and filed this report.
Sonia Ibidi has lived in many Arab countries, where she worked as a journalist and a reporter for an international tourism magazine for several years. The 43-year-old entrepreneur returned home and invested all her savings in this land 4 years ago. Since then, it has become the first farm for edible flowers in Tunisia. It is located in the Yellow Lake village in the region of Tabarqa, northwest of the country.
At the beginning, some locals thought I was crazy for eating flowers because it's not part of their menu or cuisine in this rural region. Then they joined me to work the land and grow the flowers. That's how they discovered the importance of flowers for nature and started promoting this exceptional product.
Sonia picked some fresh flowers for me to eat and enjoy. It's a unique experience, but the taste is familiar. I would say it's like an organic salad. Sonia says her edible flowers have many health benefits. In fact, the production, distribution and consumption of flowers in Tunisia has increased since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic last year.
The flowers I picked and chose to grow in this farm have a good taste and smell that Tunisians like. I started with 5 or 6 seeds which I planted in pots. For example, capuchin flowers contain vitamin and boosts the immune system, especially during the pandemic.
Sonia believes in social economy in rural areas. The entrepreneur supports women in this mountainous region. Her business has created dozens of permanent jobs, as well as 30 seasonal jobs during the spring season.
I joined Sonia and some of her employees over lunch, and we discussed the positive impact of the farm on their lives. Sonia calls these women her sisters and business partners, while they describe her as the strong and courageous flower lady. Rauda was born and raised in this rural area. The 45-year-old farmer says work has empowered women and changed the lives of their families.
I have 3 kids at school. I grow flowers to buy books and pay for their education. It's a decent job. As a rural woman, I feel free and independent when I work on the farm. Here, I earn a living and I can offer a better future for my children.
The entrepreneur developed a business model based on domestic production and export to the international market. In the meantime, Sonia succeeded in creating a local market. Many prestigious restaurants and 5-star hotels are buying more than 40 flower varieties.
Growing flowers is an adventure and is a very challenging activity. I continue to research and to learn from nature every day. I'm proud of having created the first market for edible flowers in Tunisia and the region. I hope more people will follow my path.
In addition to edible flower farming, Sonia has planted a large quantity of strawberries. She is selling both the fruit and the leaves, which can be used for herbal teas. The entrepreneur now plans to launch an online platform to sell her farm produce to the whole world. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tabarqa, Tunisia.
All right, then a quick run through the currencies for you. Let's focus on East Africa as we wrap up the hour. The Kenyan shilling has been enjoying a rather good run of form, at least so far in April. It's peeled away from flirting with the 110 to the dollar levels we've seen at least in some parts of the year, and it's back to points that we last saw in July 2020. Now that's partly because it's been buoyed by inflows from the IMF and of course external capital looking for gains from an infrastructure bond that raised over $760 million last week. In the crypto world, Bitcoin has been hitting fresh highs yet again today, 63,186 the high so far. That brings year-to-date gains on that virtual currency to over 117%. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screen right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today's up next from Washington, D.C.